Did Falcons GM Terry Fontenot hit a home run with a draft do-over with the team's practice squad edition?
You are Locked On Falcons, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, everyone, to another illustrious episode of the Locked On Falcons podcast, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is sponsored by PrizePicks. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL, and you'll get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. So if you do not know me, I'm your very humble host, Aaron Freeman, a.k.a. Mr. Drew, a.k.a. Mr. AKA, and I've been covering the Atlanta Falcons for almost 2 decades, formerly at falcfans.com, RIP. Still going strong on this illustrious podcast, and I thank each and every one of you that go strong with me as everydayers. That means you make this humble podcast your first listen each and every day. And all you got to do to become an everydayer is subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. So if you are checking out today's episode, we have had a very illustrious guest. We have none other than Allen Strk. We'll talk about 10 predictions he made on both sides of the ball that we could see this upcoming season, right? And, you know, now that the cuts are in, it means camp is over. And so that's why we're looking ahead to the upcoming season. That's right around the corner. We're like 8 days away from being able to watch football, maybe 7 days, depending on when you're listening to this. But, you know, before we get into all of that, I want to get into the news of the day. The Falcons officially adding 14 of their 16-man practice squad because the kicker doesn't technically count, but they added quarterback Easton Stick, running back Carlos Washington, wide receivers Chris Blair, Dylan Drummond, and Nick Nash, tight end Josh Simon, tackle Brandon Parker, guard Joshua Gray, D-tackle Kentavious Street, edge rusher Khalid Kareem, linebacker Ronnie Harrison, cornerbacks Kobe Bryant and CJ Henderson, and of course, the German sensation kicker Lenny Krieg. And so they also reportedly signed 2 new offensive tackles, although those moves haven't been made official. Ex-Jets tackle Carter Warren, a Pitt legend. Ex-Dolphins tackle Ryan Hayes, a Michigan legend. But Alan, you know, I want to get your thoughts on, you know, anything that stands out to you with the practice squad. But of course, you know, how you doing, my friend?
I'm doing well, but I'm just getting amped up for the season. Had my first fantasy football draft last night. I'm listening to podcasts daily. I don't know if you want to give free promotion to other podcasts, so I'll restrain from naming names. But I think once late August comes, you got to start reading, you got to start listening, because unlike several other media members, I kind of just distance myself from football in June and July, and then August I got to get back to it. So, the anticipation's here, and even though the Falcons have faced some serious adversity over the past few weeks with injuries, it's definitely not been an ideal trade camp, but it was cool to see players that I thought had standout preseasons be rewarded, like Dylan Drummond's and Nick Nash's and Brandon Parker. He has some experience, so it was good to see him be included. I don't know about CJ Henderson. That was a little odd choice, but top 10 picks, it always lives on. But Kentavious Street, I think he had some flashes against the Titans, even though I do find out that was he 29 years old and he's on the practice squad, but I guess this is how it is. But it was cool to see players that, because the preseason has become more and more of I don't want to call it a drag, but it's a bit of a arduous task, given that the Falcons refuse to play starters for the most part. At least the players that we enjoy watching, like Dylan Drummond, Nick Nash, etc., got rewarded.
Yeah. Well, I enjoyed Easton Stick, Alan. I don't know about you, but
I will say I got an email from, I don't know, some PR lady asked me if I want to do something with Ben DiNucci and Bud Light. I'm just like, look, just because I live in New York and I have a media background, I don't know what you want me to do with Ben DiNucci, but definitely did enjoy watching Ben DiNucci.
You know, he was for the people, and unfortunately, the people rejected him. But he another Pitt legend. But yeah, man, you got these 14 guys plus the 2 that have not been officially announced, the offensive tackle. So you got 16 out of 17. We'll see if we get that 17th one announced on Thursday officially. If not, then we probably got some roster shenanigans, and that probably means they're saving that last spot for someone who's currently on the 53. But we'll see how that goes in the coming days. But when looking at this group, to me, the most interesting thing is not necessarily the guys that they're brought back. I'm like, that's fine. Like some of these guys are like Kentavious Street and Khalid Kareem. If there's injuries on the D line, you could plug and play with those guys. Wide receiver Chris Blair, Easton Stick. Obviously, God forbid, we get to a point where Easton Stick has to play, but you can run a functional NFL offense for 3 quarters with Easton Stick. That fourth quarter is going to be a doozy, right? And then Lenny Creek gives you some insurance in the event that who falls off a cliff or gets hurt again this upcoming season. So I think there's value to this crop of players. You got some young guys that were had a lot of hype, but for me, like ultimately, like if here Josh Gray and Josh Simon and Kobe Bryant and all these guys are playing significant snaps this year, something's gone wrong.
I forgot to mention Kobe Bryant. I think he might have signed to him.
Okay, well, I think he's got something to him, which is penalties, but it is what it is.
I mean, look, penalties, these things happen.
Yeah,
he's a ball hawk, but they get a lot of these players earn their stripes with the ball hawk reputation. But he gets a cool college pedigree.
Yeah, sure. Yes, college. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, I know you want Lamar Jackson just for the content.
Yes.
All those times he got beat against the Titans, it doesn't matter
though. Yes, Lamar Jackson, the cornerback. I want Lamar Jackson, the cornerback. Yeah, man. I don't. Alan, you have anything else? I mean, my only takeaway is the 2 tackles. I've been complaining about the Falcons not drafting a tackle for the 3 previous offseasons. Obviously, they got Jack Nelson at the end of this year's draft. Unfortunately, Jack Nelson's a 3-year project, but we'll take that in round 7. That's better than taking a 3-year project in round 3. So for me, like I look at them taking these swings on Warren and Ryan Hayes and Mike Jarrell, and it's like, okay, well, we got 3 guys that were drafted the last 3, 2+ drafts. So I guess it's like the equivalent of drafting those guys ourselves, and maybe they turn into something.
Yeah, that's a possible way of looking at it. And if Dwayne Ledford is the offensive line, I don't know if guru is the right word, but he is someone that has built up talent in the past. Maybe he gets something out of them, because I am highly skeptical of Elijah Wilkins that could last at right tackle. And maybe one of these young tackles will step up. I know Seattle's offensive line was a complete catastrophic mess last year, but Mike Jarrell had some flashes for what I watched. I know he allowed a lot of pressure, but then again, that Seattle offensive line and just what Ryan Grubb was asking from them, I thought was a lot to handle. And he might be someone that could be a good swing tackle until Storm Norton is healthy.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like all of these bets, whether we're talking about the undrafted guys that stuck on the practice squad or these offensive tackles, like I don't know how many of these bets are going to pay off this season, but I do think some of these have the potential to pay off down the road for the Falcons. So, and that to me is kind of the point of the practice squad. It's like, yeah, if we, a couple of these guys, if we need you to play right away because of an injury, then great. But obviously, like if we're down to practice squad players getting serious snaps, then again, like that's probably not a sign for things going the way that we want them to go during the season. But I feel like that's a good segue to get into some of the things that we sort of expect to go during the season. Because I know, Alan, you put together 10 bold predictions, and I want to kind of focus on the 4 that you did on the offensive side of the ball, most of them being positive, which at least suggests to me that you feel a lot more optimistic and confident that this offensive product is going to be better than maybe the defensive product. But without, spoiling that, one of them is, involving the young quarterback here in Atlanta, and I want to pick your brain on that as we continue today's Locked On Falcons. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, the daily fantasy platform that's going to let you turn your football prediction into real rewards. College football is already heating up, and the NFL season isn't far behind. No matter who you have your eye on, PrizePicks is going to make it easy to get in the game. And to kick things off, their max discounts for both college and NFL action over these next 2 weeks are looking very interesting. For example, week 1, Dak Prescott, all he has to do is hit more than 0.5 passing yards, and all you got to do to play PrizePicks is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and if you get them right, you cash in and multiply your money, and those max discounts are basically giving you one easy pick, so you just need one more. It's that easy. Maybe you tag that with a Michael Penix more or less stat projection, or you're looking at these yards and touchdown projections for Arch Manning, Carson Beck, and Gunnar Duval Stockton in their season debuts this weekend. So get in the game by downloading the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL, and you'll get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you first $5 play. PrizePicks, run your game. So, guys, before we get into this conversation about some things that could go right or wrong for this Falcons offense with Allen Strk, I want to let you know about Locked On wants to hear from you. We put together a survey to learn more about our listeners and make your favorite podcast even better. This is your chance to tell us what you like, what you don't, and answer some questions about our advertising. All you got to do is go to lockedonpodcast.com/survey, and you can get started. Everyone who completes a survey will be entered for a chance to win one of 10 $100 Amazon gift cards. Again, that's lockedonpodcasts.com/survey, where you can find the link in the show notes. Thank you for helping us out. So, Allen Strk here, a contributor over at the Falcoholic, wrote a piece on Tuesday, where he made 10 predictions, 5 positive, 5 negative. We're not going to necessarily break down all of them, but I think many of them bear mentioning, starting with the offense. 4 on offense, 3 of them being positive, with the first one being Michael Penix throwing for 27 touchdowns this year, which would be the most touchdowns for a Falcons quarterback since 2018, as you mentioned. Another positive one, Darnell Mooney has a career year on the back of that. Matthew Bergeron makes a leap as that third positive, but you also mentioned one that you was considered negative, which is Ryan Neuzil going through his share of struggles. Allen, which one of those bold predictions do you feel best about?
Ooh, that's a very good question. I'm gonna go with Bergeron.
Okay.
I was thoroughly impressed by Bergeron last year. It just needs to cut down the penalties, and maybe I think the early season going against the Steelers, kind of, because that Steelers game was just a complete mess. And I think everyone, the offensive line, took a beating in that game, and just that first impression, how poor first impressions are. And I think Cam Hayward just kind of dragged all of them a bit at times. But going forward with the season, I thought it was a real tone setter as a run blocker. Remember that Eagles game? I thought he completely controlled line of scrimmage. He even gave Jalen Carter some problems. So I think he just kind of built on that. And there were just some highlight moments. I don't know if you remember the Carolina game where I thought the Falcons averaged 8 yards per carry, but I don't know who the safety was. Bergeron literally just smashed into him, and Bijan literally walked into the end zone. So I think how he is as a run blocker, I think that's very encouraging signs. It's just limiting the penalties, playing a little bit more composure, and the kind of his punch when it comes to blocking those really those massive not massive interior tackles, but just the guys, the premier defensive tackles. Because I know early in his career, rookie year, who's Carolina guy? Oh my God,
Derek Brown.
So shameful. Derek Brown, and then Kenny Clark. See, I remember Kenny Clark really gave props.
Clark was rough. It was
really
rough.
But it was the first 2 games of his career. So I just maybe the early couple games gave people bad impression. But I just thought as the season progressed, Bergeron got better as a pass protector, and I really do think he is a tone setter when it comes to run blocking. So I'm very encouraged by it, and I do think they should keep him at left guard. I know he has a tackle background, but don't stun his development. He's on a good upward trajectory.
Well, we will agree on that latter point. I feel like he's come a far way in pass protection, right? I don't think there were really any Kenny Clark level performances last year, even with some of the struggles against Cam Hayward in week 1. I'm still leaving a little bit underwhelmed with the run blocking. There are moments, like you mentioned. I think there are moments where he's good, but I haven't seen this sort of consistent level of run blocking that I was hoping to see, because I kind of thought he would be a Kaleb McGary-esque sort of impact player at the guard position in terms of the run blocking. I haven't really seen that manifest.
I just knew you were going to bring up Kaleb McGary when you were
he is the topic of the week, but obviously you're higher on Bergeron, and I think deservingly so. This is an important year 3. Been talking about that all off season. We want to see him make that leap, and I don't think it's a bad bet that he will make that leap in that all important year 3 for offensive linemen. Obviously, you mentioned Ryan Neuzil's potential struggles, so that was an issue where it's there were already question marks along the offensive line. They lose Kaleb McGary. Now Elijah Wilkinson's the first man up and potentially the only man up. between now and when Storm Norton comes back sometime, hopefully in October. But, are your concerns about the offensive line potentially making you feel less optimistic about, maybe Penix having that sort of breakout type of year that you also predicted?
Yeah, absolutely. Just because I think Zach Robinson, even though he is known for making alterations, we didn't see enough last year where he was given chip help. I'm going to bring the Steelers game again, but Kaleb McGary on island with TJ Watt. And there's just other instances where I think he's too reliant on 11 personnel. Now, I think the Vikings game, you saw using more 12 and 22. And maybe now that Penix is in the lineup, that he does mix up the personnel usage, but he needs to be more willing to less spread. And I think more condensed formations could really benefit this team just to give it that right tackle help. So I am a little cautious of that just because Zach Robinson, it did take him time to adjust. But look, maybe a year under his belt, things get better. But the Falcons have a pretty tough schedule, and I'm expecting Penix, as great as he played in those 3 games, it's still a limited sample size, and he does tend to take hits. Like, he's not someone that wants to skip the pocket often. He wants to stand strong and let the ball rip. And I think that makes him a little bit more prone to, if not taking sacks, at least taking more punishment.
We will see on that front. I'm wondering if Zach Robinson is going to stick with the 11 personnel just because the run blocking is not going to be as good, and he needs to try to scheme up light boxes so that the run blocking can be put in advantageous situations, which I think was a big contributing factor to why they were so efficient running the football last year. But I do wonder, does he offset that by dialing up more play action out of that 11 personnel and hopefully asking Kyle Pitts to do more than necessarily chip? Or, do they try to utilize Kyle Pitts more as a wide receiver? There was some buzz early in training camp about, Kyle Pitts is practicing with their receivers. And so are they going to treat him like a slot receiver instead of Ray McLeod being sort of that featured slot in those situations, try to get a bigger body out there to help out with the run blocking in space and whatnot. So these are all, to me, fascinating questions I've been having for the last 6 months. I'm curious where are you at with what this offense has the potential to be?
Do you think they could play more pistol? I think just it gives them more opportunities to not just spread things out, but also helps them in the running game at least cope without McGary.
Yeah. I wonder, they barely ran any under center stuff with Penix in the lineup last year. And I'm wondering if that continues. And if they do increase that significantly, my assumption has been like that will correlate to a significant increase in play action usage. But, I think the staple of the offense is going to be a lot of shotgun, a lot of pistol again.
That makes sense. And I do wonder how much they could utilize Drake London as a power slot, because we know how dangerous he can be on those underneath routes, whether it's hitches or shallow crosses. He's so dangerous after a catch. And I think we saw the usage in those 3 games that Penix started. And I know it's a bit inflated because Mooney was out, but it's pretty evident that London is going to be that guy.
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, I would bet on Drake finishing top 5 in like targets. I think some of the projections on like him like leading the league in targets, that to me, I'm not necessarily keen to see, because that probably means that Mooney is kind of an afterthought in the offense and Kyle Pitts is also an afterthought in the offense. And again, I think running your Drake being the primary option in your passing attack, I think is a good thing, but him, getting to the point where we're talking like 180, 200 some odd targets that I've seen some people throw out there as projections, I feel like that's not a healthy version of the Falcons offense.
Especially when you have a superstar in the backfield. And I think also if he's that high in targets, it kind of correlates with them playing from behind a lot. And this is a team that you want them to be playing behind a lot, mainly because now the offensive line issues. So, and like, they're built to be a balanced attack. I know it's very exciting watching Penix highlight reel, and you see what London does and Mooney, and you'll see what Pitts, but it's just, let's not forget what is the foundation of this team, and it does come with running the ball, and to me having arguably the second best tandem in the league.
Okay. We sort of mentioned the Neuzil aspect of it. Where are you at with Ryan Neuzil at this point?
I'm really concerned with them as a pass protector just because I think he was late, and maybe just the lack of experience now, but it just seemed like he was late when it came to like pick up twists and even blitzes. It's just he's kind of caught no man's land at time, and 7 penalties in 9 games is not ideal for a center. I think he should be paying more clean. It seemed like he was comfortable in the favorable matchups. Like I remember playing well against Carolina and Dallas, but when it came to even like that New Orleans game was tough. I remember he didn't play well in that, and I think both New Orleans games actually come to mind.
The Denver game stood out to me as one.
Yeah, I mean Denver.
I guess it is Denver.
They have the ferocious defensive line. Good Lord, but I just think he needs to get. He needs to be more aware. I just think it's times where he's late on diagnosing twists and blitzes, and it's just as a center you got to be more alert. I do think he has some promise as a run blocker. When it comes to getting up in space, I do think he's a pretty good athlete, but it's the pass protection that really worries me.
Yeah.
How do you feel?
I mean, I was nervous about it, but now I'm much more concerned about the right tackle position than I am the center. So it's just like I hope Neuzil's good. I mean, if he's not, if you have 2 weaknesses on that offensive line, if Bergeron doesn't make a leap, this goes from a pretty good offensive line, top 12-ish, right, to probably a below average unit. I saw Brandon Thorne dropped him from like 13 to 23 in his offensive line rankings just because of the Kaleb McGary injury. And
wow, look at you! You're vindicated for Kaleb McGary. Kaleb McGary is that valuable.
Well, I just think it's not to sit here and say like I think what to me my translation of it is like there is a glut of teams in the middle of this league that have competent offensive lines, and the Falcons were at the top of that because you had 3 proven pieces that gave you plus value, even if Kaleb McGary was a one-dimensional in terms of the run blocking, and now you don't have that. And so now do you have 3 pieces? Again, Bergeron's got to be that plus player this year. And then hopefully Neuzil can make strides, as you say, like, again, like he was fine last year for a injury fill-in, but like 17 games of what we got from Ryan Neuzil to me is not making me, feel great about the offensive line play.
Right. And I think Brandon Thorne, I don't know if he mentioned it, but you look at the metrics, like how efficient the Falcons were running to the right last year. I think it was like 5.7 yards per carry. Right?
Yeah, behind right tackle, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. So I could see that raising the significance of it. And of course, look, he's protecting Penix's blind side. And I do think McGary did make some strides as a pass blocker last year. Like there weren't too many games where, McGary's had those games where you just want to smack yourself in the head. Like, oh boy, this is going to be a long game. Like he didn't have too many of those moments last year. So I do think 10 spots is a bit drastic, but then again, I haven't seen the article, but it's no denying like McGary is just his tone setter as a run blocker and his slight strides as a pass protector. It's a massive loss, and it's just for it to happen literally on the eve of the season is very concerning. Just because I do think if this happened maybe late July, early August, there could potentially have been a plan to do something. But now it's just you just got to adapt.
Yeah. I want to get into the potential ceiling of this offense, given the circumstances that the Falcons are now dealing with. Do you feel like it's still the same, or has it been lowered, or is this more about the floor conversation when it comes to this Falcons offense and their potential? And we'll do that to wrap up today's Locked On Falcons. So we do a lot of pumping here on this podcast when we talk about Michael Penix Jr. this season, and I want to make sure you're all ready. Rugiet ready. Rugiet ready being that next-gen prescription treatment that goes beyond Viagra and Cialis. It is designed to amplify arousal in the brain and boost blood flow. And the other part that you think with, you don't have to wait hours because Rugiet's 3-in-1 formula dissolves under your tongue and kicks in fast on average in 15 minutes. And the effects can last up to 36 hours, so you can stay confident and in control when the moment is right. So get your pump on by heading to Rugiet.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL to get 15% off your order today. That's RUGIET.com/LockedOnNFL. And use promo code LockedOnNFL for 15% off. Individual results may vary with prescription treatment. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law but are not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, and manufacturing review. Please visit the Rugiet website for full safety information. And the NFL season is almost here. FanDuel is going to make sure that you're ready for kickoff with this can't-miss offer, because right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300. That is $300 in bonus bets to use across the app, where you can find so many different ways to win on FanDuel. They're going to keep things interesting. If you're looking at, a potential big week for a specific player, that's when you go with the player prop. If you got a hunch that several things are going to happen in a game, that's when you go with the same game parlay. And again, that little bit of action, just makes things a little bit more interesting. Nothing, that you're throwing out there to the degree that you're going to miss it, just to make things a little bit more interested. So if you're ready to make things a little bit more interesting, and if you're ready to play, make sure you download the FanDuel app right now by visiting FanDuel.com, and you can get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. So, Alan, to me, like, a big part of this upcoming season is, can they get the consistency that was lacking last year, where you had games where this offense looked really potent, was a legit top 5, top 10 unit, those 2 Bucks games or standout moments. And they obviously have a chance to show that again against a favorable opponent, particularly if Todd Bowles is out here still doing country cover 3 in the year of our Lord 2025. That is, like catnip for this offense, and particularly for a quarterback like Michael Penix. But, do you feel like, in light of these injuries, in light of where this roster is as we sit here offensively, we don't quite 100% know if Darnell Mooney is going to be ready for that week 1 game as we sit here today talking about it? Do you feel like, with Penix at the helm, are you expecting an up and down, more of a roller coaster that is typical of a young quarterback? You expect it to kind of start slow through these first early part of the season and ramp up in the middle and latter part of the season? What are kind of your expectations for not only the potential ceiling of this offense with Michael Penix, but sort of the trajectory? Is it going to be that up and down, or that slow ramp up, or where you fall on that?
It will be a bit of a roller coaster just because it's Penix's playing style, like his throwing motion, the lack of touch on throws. Like you saw, I think the Washington game kind of encapsulated not where he is now, but like just what he was going into his rookie year. Like you saw the highs of highs, you saw the beautiful touch on the pits, but there were about 5 or 6 throws that he just sprayed it and it wasn't even catchable. So you hope with the offseason work, there's a lot of talk about him being compared to Matthew Stafford, and just being able to use his eyes when it comes to swaying defenders at position. I think that's going to be really exciting, because from all indications, you're hearing reports of just how well he's processing and seeing the field, and he's wise above his years. So I think that's all encouraging, and just the poise that he plays with. So I think his ceiling is still high to me. The floor does get lowered a little bit just because he is maybe one of those rookie young quarterbacks where he's too fearless for his own good. Like you could imagine him trying to fit in some tight window throws in areas that he should not be throwing, because from a confidence standpoint, because he certainly doesn't lack confidence. So I'm fully expecting a roller coaster ride, especially when you look at the schedule. Brian Flores week 2, that's going to be a doozy. But I'm trying to think, Sean McDermott, I know people can say what they want about Sean McDermott's defense, but one thing is they're going to be positionally sound, and I do think they have some bodies up front that could cause some damage. So there's some early tests. We talk about the primetime games. He's got to be ready to go. And I do think, just based on what we saw in the first 3 games, there's going to be some real inconsistency, but the highs will be super high.
Okay. I'm curious to see if the volatility is going to come from him being too aggressive and putting the ball in harm's way, which I think you were trying to get at, because of his ability and, I guess, overconfidence. Is that a fair way of putting it?
Maybe just being too fearless for his own good, because I don't think he gives off the impression that he's arrogant. I don't think he considers himself to be anything better than whoever may be.
No, not personality, but arm arrogance is more what we're talking about.
Arm arrogance. I just think he's also a bit robotic. Like, I think he just wants to get the ball out. That's another part of his game that I think is a little bit of a concern. Just the fact that he just sometimes he just wants to focus on his primary read and just get the ball out regardless of what the coverage is. So sometimes I just think he doesn't use his legs enough. And maybe we know he's not the quickest athlete. He's not someone that wants to scramble, but I think there's times where he could be better with his pocket presence and evade the rush and, just move around the pocket better rather than just kind of being a little stiff.
Okay. I think that's fair. I feel like one of the strengths of Penix is that he doesn't seem, based off of what we have seen so far at Washington last year in 3 games, so far in training camp, he doesn't seem to put the ball in harm's way that much. I think, to me, the volatility comes from the sprays. Like, again, are we going to get games like we saw against Washington where it was a little too inconsistent for the first 3 quarters of that game? But then, once we got into like the 2-minute drill right before halftime, fourth quarter, 4-minute drill, that stuff, I think he was dialed in. But is he going to be, that to me is where my concerns are for the potential roller coaster than necessarily him, coming out there and turning the ball over. But again, you never know with a young quarterback. It's not as if we've experienced a young quarterback that has turned the ball over a ton. It's not like we've experienced a veteran quarterback in recent memory that turned the ball over a ton. It's not as if we've gone through a quarterback that on primetime football games has decided to throw the ball from laying on his back up in the air in the rain, as if that's a good decision. So, we haven't experienced those things over the last couple of years, so I'm not too concerned that we're going to experience those things under Michael Penix.
Well, so you just gave a great 3-year summation of the Falcons quarterback experience. Yeah, I try to forget that Marcus Mariota moment, but nevertheless,
what's so funny about that Carolina game is like Mariota was doing wild stuff is the kindest way of putting it. But like he also showed more anticipation in that game than he probably did in most of the games he played that year.
In a rainstorm, nonetheless. But at least that game did produce one of the best Arthur Smith GIFs that I still consistently use to this day. So these are the silver linings. But I think also with Penix, what you could look at I mentioned the Carolina game, is just he's someone that's very decisive. I love the fact that when the London touchdown, the play beforehand, he went to London the same go ball. And I think London just didn't get both feet in bounds, and he went back to it the same next play. So I think when he sees a mismatch, he's going to target it. So it just, those little things matter when it comes to just seeing how a young quarterback progresses, because if the mismatch is there, you want to see him exploit it. And I think he did a great job of that. And Tampa Bay, just based on their defense and some of the personnel issues they have, I think there's going to be plenty of mismatches he can exploit and space across the middle of the field where he could hit. So, look, they being decisive is great. It just, I do get a little concerned. It just seems like his move in the pocket be a bit too robotic, but maybe that could change up with just more experience.
Okay. Well, I think play action can help him, that get you on the move, get you rolling out, hewing out some deep over routes and deep posts and corners and whatnot. So we'll see if the Falcons can take advantage of that. High expectations for this team heading into week 1. We only sort of got into the offense when it came to Allen's predictions this upcoming season, but there were still 6 on the defense. And because, Allen and I are having such a awesome conversation, let's extend this conversation into a part 2. Allen, before we duck out of this part 1, let the people know, where they can find your stuff and some of the other things that you're working on over at the Falcon.
Allen Strk, ALLEN-STRK on X and Blue Sky. Professional terminology right here, folks. Right now, working on this long form feature for Penix. So every year I try to do like a big season preview, but rather than just like doing your standard original preview where it's like 4 or 5 different things and doing a season prediction, I like focusing on one particular thing. So last year I focused on Raheem Morris's journey because I thought Raheem being back in Atlanta was a big deal and it wasn't getting much notoriety. Maybe this year I could have went with more of under radar storyline, but I just think everything's about Penix right now in Atlanta. We need to focus on him and how he's built up his career from being a very controversial pick to now being one of the most anticipated young players ever in Atlanta history, at least in the last 20 years. Like, there is huge buzz around Penix. So I'm working on long form piece, just kind of elaborating on his journey, where I'm going to layer the context of how he came to Atlanta, the emotion of it, but then also give you some technical analysis of what's it been like so far for him and what to potentially expect for 2025.
I look forward to checking that out. Of course, folks find that over at thefalcoholic.com. But we still got more from Allen Strk when we look at this defense as we continue on part 2 of the Locked On Falcons podcast. I want to let you know, continue to make us your first listen by checking us out on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts, so you can check out that part 2, as well as all the upcoming great content that is coming your way. Go check out the listener survey over at lockedonpodcasts.com/survey and get a chance to win one of 10 $100 Amazon gift cards. And of course, after you finish checking out Locked On Falcons, why not get those last minute tips for your upcoming or past fantasy draft over at Locked On Fantasy Football? It is all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.